How do you wire out a bonsai tree? It is not all that hard, but many people struggle. So today I'm showing you how to wire a tree. I'll tell you a little bit about when to wire a tree. I'll show you different types of wire. And pretty much this is a 101 starting off wiring bonsai. You'll see me use regular scissors, yin pliers, small wire clippers and large wire clippers. And of course the branch that I will be wiring out. That is this one. And because it is the wrong season, I'm not wiring a living tree. I am just wiring this little yew that I collected. Taking off the lower branch, and now I'm just going to attach it to this wooden block so you can see what I do, and it will stand up right by itself. Give me a second to get this sorted. The first step when wiring out a tree is of course figuring out what shape of tree am I going to make. Now here I have a nice main trunk line, but I also have a nice secondary trunk line, and just because this is just an example, I'm just going to remove here this main continuation if these scissors will work for me. I definitely don't need these small things. So basically what you do initially is, after you've established what is my tree going to be like, it is going to be a little tree just like this. Then you look at the tree and you say, well, what do I need to style this? And these very small things that sit in the knuckles or in the elbows or directly on the trunk, that just clutter it up, I typically remove. But you need to keep thinking about what do I need, because these little things, well, these I don't need, but this one might later on be used. So I'm removing those. Now I get here to a point and there's a whole bunch of branches sitting together. When you're wiring out, this is not very pleasant, and you get wires crossing, you get wires heaping up, and that's why we remove everything except for the one side branch that we're going to use. So now I've got the trunk line. I'm going to use this branch, so I'm not going to use this branch. I'm going to use this side branch, here in the top. Well, let's, for the sake of argument, remove all of this. This I might use, but it is too small, so I'm not going to wire it. And here it splits into three, removing the middle one. Then it comes to these sections. If you want to wire these, then all these needles are in the way. Now for a yew, that's not a problem. If you remove them, it will resprout. So you can decide, I'm going to remove it. However, for many species, it's good to actually leave a little bit of green on. So let's leave a little bit of green on. Now at these lower branches, I'm going to use this one. I'm not going to use the rest of it. And that's just a personal choice, right? This is just design of the tree. This is not wiring. Right. There we go. Now we've got the start of a bonsai. All I need now is wire. So when it comes to wire, there's different types. This is all aluminium wire. I've got my 1.5 millimeters, my 2, my 2.5, my 3. And this is very soft and pliable, and besides that it has a nice little brown color given in the fabrication process. There's also copper wire that you could use. The downside of copper wire is when you wire it around a branch, it gets harder, and therefore it's harder to correct. Certainly, to show you how this works, it is more difficult to work with. If you don't know what you're doing, then you can always use aluminium. It's a lot softer, it is easier to work. However, the branches are still somewhat pliable after putting this on. So you have to be more careful when you're pushing or you're bending the branches. Now, what size wire? In general, about a third to half of the thickness of the branch that you are bending will be sufficient. That means that for this one, I probably go to my 3 millimeter aluminium. This is 6-7 millimeters. How much do I need? I need about 1.5 times the length of the branch that I'm going to wire. So if I'm going to wire all the way from the bottom into here, because that's what I'm intending to do, then I need about this much. So let's cut that off with my wire cutter. And when wiring, you always try to start with the heaviest wire. That's the wire that needs most pressure, and therefore it's the biggest branches, and therefore you have the biggest bends. The smaller branches you can do afterwards, and it's a good practice to start with the lowest branches first, or well, the trunk, then the lowest branches, and then work your way up into the canopy. I need to find my front again. This was my front. No, actually this is my front. Why is this my front? Well, because this branch and that branch, those are the two first branches on my tree, are both on this side of the tree. So this branch will come towards me. That means that I'm going to wire in a way that if I bend it towards me, it automatically strengthens. Now this is a trick. You can just push it into the soil, and then you have an anchor point for the start of this wire. For all the other wires, you're always going to work with two branches on one wire. What you do, you take the branch, you just put suitable sized wire across the Y, basically across the split. One end, you bend it around one side of the branch, the other end goes up around the other side, all the way until you get to the next split. There you select the thickest, the heaviest. In this case they're similarly sized. I'm going to go for this one, and I go at least one, ideally two wraps around and prune. This can now be bent up or down, it just stays in place. Now for this bend I need to use thinner wire. Let's see how much thinner is this. This is not thinner. And in order to get around this V, I put it in parallel to the existing wire. Then I wire one up, following this wire. Now these two anchor each other. So this branch is now just connected by two wires, and therefore this continuation line can be manipulated. And for this one I go around and continue wiring up the branch. There's a little side butt which I want to keep, so I go below the side butt and I just continue wiring this out. Here I now get to a three-way split. Remove one from the split. I of course remove all the butts at the split, maybe some of the needles, and I go up along the thickest of the two. And here it is a matter of going in between the needles or removing the needles as you wish. Now this can be manipulated, and this can be manipulated. You see how, because I continued the thick wire past the split, you can now make a nice smooth bend. This is connected to this by wire, and I can just manipulate it whichever way I want. And what you see here now, I'm wiring this branch out, not doing it very well because there's a little branch stump. I should have removed that, so the wire sits flush with the trunk, like that. Then it sits at about 60 degrees, 45 to 60 degrees angle with the branch that you're wiring. If you do it closer, it becomes a coil that you can easily bend. If you do it more straight, you don't have any holding power. I want this branch to come down a little bit. So this wire needs to go around the whole trunk, and ideally as it reaches the other side, be just on the level of the branch or just above it. And you see it is now just at the height of this branch. I can loop it over and wire this trunk or this branch. And I do this at least once, preferably twice around this new branch here. Just like that. This is now as far as I want to go, because you can already see the wire here is as big as the branch that I'm wiring. So I need to switch wire size. important, what I want here is that the bend is as close as possible to this main trunk, and I don't want this to tear out. So now this is set, and here also in this branch pad I can say, okay, which are the side branches that I'm going to use. I'm not going to use all of them. In fact, I'm only going to use one side branch at this moment, because those are opposite to each other. And I don't want it to be as long, so I'm just going to clip it back. Now these two are side branches. The same here, this is quite long. I'm just going to 1, 2, 3 and 4. This branch needs to be wired, of course. This main stem needs to be wired. In principle these are quite different in thickness, but I am going to wire them with the same thickness. And I know I just mentioned that you can measure out how much wire you need, but you can also just take a longer piece of wire. Now this is slightly thick, look, it's almost the same thickness as this branch, but I think it will be okay. And now what is important is that the wire reaches again from above, but also the wire stays parallel to the one that's already on the trunk. So I'm just going to put it parallel, exactly where I want it in the elbow, and then gently, making sure that I don't break any other branches, I wire this wire in parallel to the wire that's already on there. Then I take 1 or 2 loops around the branch that I want to wire out. As mentioned, the wire is quite thick. Carefully looping it around. So once you have this in place, and I'm actually working away from me, it works always well if you have one hand, say your left hand, that you're not wiring with, holding the wire and the branch, and then the other gently looping the wire around the branch. It shouldn't take a lot of force, the wire will put itself down in the place that it wants to go. So this branch is now also wired. This wire is going to go up, it's come up from the back, and now instead of going onto this branch, I'm just continuing. Here I have another little bit of a stump that I didn't clean out beforehand. Now this is just a little demo for a plant that is not actually a plant, so it's not all that important, but the same holds. And here I have 2 options. I can go below this little stump, or I can say no, I'm going to go above. In this case I'm going to go below. The little extra loop doesn't hurt the tree. And then I continue upward, gently aiming to not squeeze the branch that sits there, giving it a little bit of space for another wire that needs to come up. And I go as far as I want to go up along this branch. And in this case I'm not going to step down until I reach the fork at the top. And here, as before, I just do 1 or 2 loops. So now what we have, I have this branch wired in a position that I can just shape it the way I want. And now I've got this main trunk as well wired to shape the way that I want it. And this can be anything, right? This is your own personal imagination. And now I'm at the point that all these smaller branches need to be wired, and for that I'm going to use 1 step smaller again. And instead of 1.5, I could even use 1. But that has very, very little holding power. And for this demo I really want to use something that has hold. So there we go. This is my 1.5. Just take a bit of wire. And as before, right? This branch needs to be wired with this wire. So I loop it here in the fork where I need it to get access, and then I go up. And then it's tempting to use this branch and wire that as well, but that's not possible. If I do that, then I create a what do you call it, a whip up? I don't know, there's a Dutch word for it. Basically, if you then bend this branch, then that branch will come up as well. So I need to go up, and I go up further along the trunk. And in this case I'm afraid I'm going to have to go up quite far, because there's no other side branches here in view. So I just go up, following the earlier wire that was placed here, making sure I don't push off any of these branches. And now I come here, and this is the final branch on this tree. And now it is tempting to go very quick, but I'm trying to gently slide the wire somewhat between the needles. Let's clip that off. And then do the same thing here. Gently try to position it as much as possible between the needles, not trapping many. You can see that this plant is slowly drying out. It's starting to droop by itself. It's not great, but it works. Right, and now this branch can also be positioned where and how I want it. Same for this one. Now, let me see, like that. And then for the top, I'm not going to continue wiring, I'm just going to clip it off to create a top in the future when new side branches come. Now I have here still this V that I never wired out. And again, I'm taking my thinner wire. I am looking for the direction that the wire that's already on there is taking, putting it parallel, going around, and I go first on the strongest branch and then I go on the weaker branch so that I don't push the weaker branch off when I'm wiring the stronger one. There we go. And ideally you wire all the way until the end of the branch, but if you don't have the length for these very thin branches, it doesn't really matter. And again, I can now position the branch any direction that I want, any form, any shape. Now in this case I am out of branches to wire the small one with, and what you then can do is say, okay, I'm just going to take this thin wire, again I want it to be parallel with the existing wiring, and I'm just taking a small bit and I'm going to have it end somewhere on the trunk. I'm going around the trunk twice at least, again not crossing any of these wires, and then just sitting it on the trunk snugly should provide enough support. But this is really just if you can't do anything else, if you don't have any branches left over. Now, so this wire needs to come over because it's going to bend down and then around. And with that, if you bend it down, the wire will tighten on itself because it came from the top. If you pull down, it gets tighter. And now I can also position this any which way I want. And then it is important that if you have all these branches wired out, that you give them a pattern that works with each other. So that if you look from one direction, say this is the front, now all the branches stand in a similar position. You have got two to the front, there's one that goes a little bit to the back and down, this one is to the back and down, and then ideally I get this and turn it a little bit more to the front. And you see what happens if you take wire that's actually too thick. You start to squeeze the branch and the needles come up and down. That's not pretty. But this is a first one-on-one guide on how to wire out. Now when do you do this sort of work? Ideally this is done either in early spring, just before the plants start to grow, and then you protect the tree from freezing over because then the branches will damage. Or you do it at the end of the growing season, so say 2 months or so before winter really hits, when it is not so warm anymore and it cools down. That's another good moment to wire. You can wire coniferous trees throughout winter without any problems as well. But if you now do heavy bending during late spring or early summer when the tree is very actively growing, the bark is not connected to the wood underneath in the branch shell that much and it might slip. And at that point the branch dies. So heavy bending and heavy wiring of thicker branches, don't do it in spring and summer, do it in fall and winter, and afterwards protect it a little bit from frost. But yeah, have fun, go practice, go do it, because you don't learn wiring from YouTube alone. You might learn the basics and understand roughly how this should look like, but from then on it's a matter of practicing. And of course this is just a little gimmick, right? This is just a little branch, but still makes an interesting little tree, don't you say?